This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, welcome to a new edition of Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewald, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined, as usual, by Mara Donnelly, my co-host. Welcome, Mara.
Hi, Charlie.
Why, have you received any notices from the IRS, or are they investigating you?
I hope not.
Oh, my goodness. Can you believe this news about the IRS?
It's crazy.
The IRS commissioner under this presidential administration visited the White House 161 times, whereas the Secretary of State visited the White House only 42 times. Under the prior presidential administration, the IRS commissioner visited the White House once.
Wow.
Is something up?
Probably. It certainly seems so.
Perhaps Chicago politics comes national. I don't know. Well, this will be an unfolding story. But certainly we have a guest who's very good at understanding city politics and local politics. And this person is perhaps the best authority in the state to talk about this. And we're lucky enough to have Dave Sanko back with us again. Dave,
Thanks.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Dave
Thanks
is
for having
the
me.
CEO.
Executive Director of the Township Supervisors Association.
Executive Director. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
People's titles change sometimes
Sure.
between appearances on the show. But it's good to have you back, Dave. We find that transportation, we've talked with you before about transportation, and concerns about transportation haven't gone away, particularly transportation funding. From the township perspective, what is your view of what's going on Capitol Hill now as we approach a new budget year in regard to transportation financing funding? What's up?
Well, I think the governor proposed a package earlier in the year. Senator Rafferty made some fine tuning to that and passed it out of the Senate Transportation Committee a few weeks ago. I expect, and I'm hopeful that it's going to be coming out of the Senate perhaps as early as this week, and then go over to the House. I think it spells good news for local governments all across Pennsylvania, and anybody who's concerned about their infrastructure both from a public safety standpoint, but also from an economic development standpoint. I mean, local governments maintain 2/3 of all the roads in Pennsylvania, and an awful large number of bridges that are in need of repair, just to keep our firefighters and police able to respond quickly, to keep our kids safe on school buses, and keep people being able to get to work and to play and to church, and it's important.
Unfortunately, I've been hearing a lot that the transportation funding issues are going to be tied to other big issues. Are you hearing some of that as well?
Well, Harrisburg is June is
that time of year.
the month of rumors in Harrisburg.
Yeah.
Clearly, there's been an awful lot of discussion. There are a lot of big issues confronting Pennsylvania, not the least of which are transportation funding and the overall state budget. And there are a lot of things to balance, and mandates coming from Washington, being passed along from Harrisburg, are all things that are in play for the legislature to try and figure out over the course of these next 30 days.
That was the best diplomatic answer I think I've ever heard before. Good job.
I know one of the perennial issues for the townships has always been local government consolidation. Why is bigger government not better government, Dave? Well,
it just doesn't work. I mean, the theory is that it's going to save you money, and at the end of the day, it oftentimes, more often than not, winds up costing more money. As we look at larger units of government, they just have higher overhead. They have a higher structural cost. If we want to look at perhaps an early example of consolidation, back in the 1850s, they took 13 townships and a handful of boroughs, I think half a dozen, and 9 districts, and formed them into a large single government for purposes of raising revenue and combating lawlessness. That place was called Philadelphia. And I think if we look at it today, it's probably not a good model to follow for what efficiency looks like, and it's a reason not to consolidate.
Why do you think this issue keeps the issue keeps coming up and then it ends up not going anywhere. What's the impetus behind it being one of those perennial issues?
Well, I think that local government is out there and is functional. Pennsylvania has more than most states, but it's affordable and it provides those quality levels of services. I think it continually comes up because of the mandates that are put on it. We see as governments get larger, or the larger and urban areas become distressed, and the only way they can feed the beast and get more money is to either raise taxes, or if they come to a point where they can't do that, or to try and gobble up neighboring communities and grab their
In
tax
hopes
base.
of getting more money. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, interesting.
The press has talked about something called Act 47, and I'm not sure that many of our viewers actually understand what Act 47 is, Dave. Could you explain it to them?
Sure. Act 47 was passed over 25 years ago. It was a bill to allow the Department of Community Affairs, now the Department of Community and Economic Development, to work with communities that were on the edge of financial insolvency. The law has been there some 27 years. The first communities went into Act 47 in 1987. The intent was to give them consultants, to give them the tools that they need to get on their feet and get out of debt and get back into productive as a productive government. I can tell you that the communities that joined in 1987 are still in.
Still in distressed.
They're still distressed, and some argue that they've become accustomed to the state revenue stream. That has been their new money. Now, to be fair, some communities have come out. 6 communities, all boroughs, have come out of Act 47, but most are in and seemingly stay in, unfortunately.
So, do you think that the law is good or bad? I mean, should it be revised? I mean, if people are becoming dependent on it, they're not really becoming self-sufficient again. Sure. And self-sustaining again.
I think very clearly it's in need of some reform and some revisions. In each instance, a consultant is hired to help craft a plan, and oftentimes we're told from some of the communities that the consultants, just as a matter of self-preservation, like being in Act 47 because you continue to have your contract, you continue to get fed by the state.
So rather than be part of the solution, they are part of the problem.
In some instances, that has become the case. Yeah.
Interesting.
Act 47 was created and was written to help all sorts of municipalities, all types of municipal governments. How have townships benefited from it, or not, Dave?
Well, I think at the end of the day, when you look at and it was written broadly to encompass every type of municipality. But as we look at the 27 communities that have been identified as distressed or financially insolvent, only 2 have ever been townships, and one of those was a result of a large legal award against them. So at the end of the day, townships have not benefited especially, but that's because they haven't needed to, and they haven't needed to because they've been fiscally responsible.
Good. Now you are often very concerned about unfunded mandates. What are some of the most recent ones that communities have had to deal with, and what are you doing to battle these unfunded mandates?
Well, I think unfunded mandates really spell maybe the storm clouds on the horizon, if you will, for the future of local government. Whether we're talking about the doubling of workers' compensation premiums for volunteer firefighters, or the costs associated with stormwater management that are being forced down from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, there are extraordinary burdens that are going to be facing local governments in terms of costs and how to come up with those costs. And if you don't have the revenue, people are going to say raise taxes. That's not attractive to our membership. No. And they're going to say, well, then see, they're not meeting their mission, so we ought to get rid of them. The IRS is even getting into play with local governments, as we see that they're the agency that is tasked with defining the rules for the Affordable Care Act. And one of the things that we heard coming out of Washington is that they are looking at the time worked by volunteer firefighters and counting that towards full-time equivalents of townships. That is, if that comes to pass, and that volunteer firefighters, and Pennsylvania has a long, proud history of volunteer fire service. If that becomes the death knell for the volunteer fire services, the estimates to have paid fire services across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are over $5 billion. Wow. That's an unfunded mandate. That's a bill that we can't afford to pay.
Wow. And so how do you battle that? We don't even know what's going to be in the exchange in Pennsylvania.
Right. Well,
how do you battle that?
We're working with our national counterparts in NATAT in Washington to try and get the IRS to offer an exemption, if you will, for volunteer fire services. I don't think that anybody ever thought that was intended, but as we know with the Affordable Care Act, you had to vote for it before you could find out what was in it.
Right. Still don't know what's in it.
Still finding those
yes.
things.
Yeah. The devil is in the detail with that.
What are some other examples, Dave? Do you have any other examples that come to mind, spring to mind immediately, of unfunded mandates that are affecting the townships?
I think very recently the legislature passed a law about 2 years ago to provide for cancer protection for volunteer firefighters. Townships are responsible for providing workers' compensation for volunteer firefighters. And everybody recognizes the work volunteer firefighters do and want to be cognizant of that, and certainly if they're injured or become sick in the performance of their duty, we want to make sure they're appropriately compensated. But that bill, because it looked back for 10 years for back claims, has really forced the insurance industry to walk away from insuring volunteer firefighters. And now the only place that communities are able to get insurance for workers' compensation insurance for their volunteer firefighters is through the State Workers Insurance Fund, which has in most cases been an increase between 30 and 150% in rates, unaffordable rates, and rates at the end of the day, if there are claims, the taxpayers from somewhere are still going to have to pay it.
Wow, it sounds like you're going to have some big challenges in this budget season.
There's a lot on the plate.
How do you best mobilize your membership when it comes to some of these big issues?
Well, I think people always mobilize when you're talking about money and you're talking about the potential for tax increases. So we're in regular contact with them. We just had 4,000 in town for our annual conference. Took 1,000 over to the Capitol for a legislative event. Really just encouraging them and encouraging them in their public meetings to encourage their residents to talk to their representatives, to talk to their senators about some of the concerns. Recently, the legislature had an unfunded mandate study commission. One of the things that came out of that was to ask for a fiscal impact statement for local government to be attached to the bill before it's voted by the legislature. Now,
there's a great idea.
A novel idea. Find out the information before we vote. That routinely happens for state legislation.
For state-related funding,
and there's a fiscal impact statement, but there's never been a local impact statement. So we're hopeful that Senator Eichelberger will be able to shepherd that through and provide all of our legislators and senators additional information before they have some more unintended side effects for good ideas.
That's going to be eye-opening.
Okay, well, if any of our viewers want to find you, they can find you in the hallways of the Capitol building for the next few weeks. And we hope it will find you here for our second segment that's coming right up after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania Business Council, envisioning a commonwealth in which residents enjoy a very high quality of life in sustainable communities. The Council works aggressively to define key long-term policy strategies and solutions that make the Commonwealth more competitive, creating and sustaining a better Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by Daily Underwriters of America, a better way for truck insurance. And by Penn Waste, your best local choice for your waste removal and recycling needs.
Hi, welcome back to the second segment of Behind the Headlines. And in this segment, Maura and I are joined by another Dave, only this time we're joined by David Patti, who's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
why we wanted to have you back so our viewers could have a better idea of what's happening on Capitol Hill at this point. As the budget time comes closer and closer, it seems, or so the press tells us, that the House Republicans in Harrisburg would like to solve liquor privatization. The Senate Republicans would like to solve transportation financing, transportation infrastructure financing, and the governor would really like to do something on pension reform. And can they do them all, or which ones get done, Dave? How do you look at this situation?
Well, I'd like to see them do all three. So if they want to work for me on this one, I'd love all three of those things. And they're all critical to the future of Pennsylvania in various ways. And they're not wholly unrelated, both philosophically and fiscally, in terms of what they mean to the Commonwealth. And of course, all of it comes in the construct of getting a budget done by June 30th that is fiscally responsible for the state, that allows us to spend the funds we need to operate our state and our programs next year, and hopefully to do that in a way that doesn't increase taxes for the general fund. So I think that they can all be happy, despite all the protests that, we would never link two bills together. Come on, we all know the way it works in this town.
It's that time of year.
Right, it's that time of the year, for which we have various names that we can't talk about in polite company and on television. So I think the best situation in the early part of June is for the Senate to pass a transportation bill that they really want and send it to the House, so that there's an equal exchange of hostages, since the Senate has been holding hostage the House bill on liquor privatization, and that provides them the basis for a deal. Interestingly, they're both agreed at this time that they'd rather not deal with the painful topic of pension reform. But I think they both also recognize that the growth in pension liability, in somewhat because of the market, and somewhat because of just the aging workforce and the baby boom bubble that has now gone through and is all in retirement at the same time, and living, frankly, longer lives post-retirement, through a lot of things that are no one's fault, although maybe some things that are people's fault, but a lot of things that are not. It's, for lack of a better verb, eating the rest of the general fund.
Right.
And that's not just for the state, but also for
can't
school
keep ignoring
districts,
it.
local
Yeah.
governments. You can't ignore it. So I think they know that in their heart of hearts that something has to be done. So I think it's possible to do the budget and the other three things. It takes the willpower.
But the big burning question is on time and with no tax increase?
Yes. Now, a tax increase is in the eye of the beholder sometimes. I will advocate for changing the way we collect taxes on motor fuels, which certainly a lot of people would say, well, that's a tax increase.
Yes.
If I'm paying more at the pump, whether you did it at the wholesale level or at the retail level, or if I'm paying more in tolls, or if I'm paying, more one way or the other, to more fees, that you've increased my fees, you've increased my taxes. And I wouldn't get into that semantic argument with them. Mm-hmm. And so in order to have safe roads and bridges, adequate transportation, good mass transit, my organization is willing to accept higher fees, taxes.
Right.
So we're talking more about the general fund. On pensions, there has been some discussion, not universally embraced, but of bridging the interim gap, the short-term problem, by floating some debt that would be used to pay down the pension liability, borrowing money that's inexpensive at the moment to borrow, to forego cost in the future. That's not a tax increase, but it's certainly borrowing, which is a substitution for taxes. And again, all the money has to come from us one way or the other. Mm-hmm. So I think there are some semantic, although not unimportant, battles out there, and some philosophical battles about fees, taxes, debt capitalization, mm-hmm. All of which are part of the mix. But I think in terms of the way we normally think of raising either business taxes or raising personal income taxes or other taxes like that, yes, we can get it done.
What would you say Pennsylvania's situation is right now regarding debt? How do we stack up against other states right now, Dave?
I'm not an expert on where we stand in debt. Typical of Pennsylvania in so many ways, we're not the best and we're not the worst. You know, we tend to be a kind of overall
In with the
middle
herd.
of the pack kind of state.
Yeah.
You know, there are unfortunate places where we are not in the herd, where we on corporate net income tax are among the worst, or are the worst in the country. There are things like the quality of our roads and bridges that are, of course, among the worst in the country, and our legal reform needs or lawsuit abuse problems that are among the worst in the country. So there's some things that I think we could certainly do better at, and then things in education where we're pretty good. So I mean, in terms of debt, though, that's one of those where it can always be lower, and there are a lot of good things to being lower and having the better debt, the better debt rating with the rating agencies. But Pennsylvania has the capacity to take on some more debt.
The governor proposed several changes to the business tax laws in Pennsylvania, including finally phasing out the capital stock and franchise tax. That becomes one of the first topics of discussion when it comes to increasing revenue to the state for some of the other programs. What do you see happening with some of these business tax
you're right.
proposals?
We had it's essentially a tax on the book value, the depreciated value of your assets, called the capital stock and franchise tax, and it was at 10 mils. And without getting into the detail, the idea was, well, if you reduce it by one mil every year for 10 years, it's gone.
How long ago was that?
14 years
14
ago.
years.
So we, but 9/11 came right afterwards.
It was suspended
and there were
for
some
several
times it was
years.
suspended where we only did half a phase out. The important thing is we have made continuous progress for the whole time. We are in the last year of the phase out, and in fact, the governor didn't propose a change because the original law said it will happen unless the General Assembly takes action to stop it from happening. So you would actually have to change the law to stop it from happening. Democrats in the Senate have suggested they would like to do that and say it will generate some $340 million. And this is an interesting one for supply-siders. Here's a tax that was doing about $1 billion a year when they started it. We're down to less than 1/10 of what it was, and it's still generating 35 or 40% of the income that it used to generate. So something's going on. People reinvest it in the economy, reinvest it in assets. From the point of view of the business community, the decision to stop that phase out would be completely equivalent to us as a decision to raise business taxes.
Right.
And we would consider that a tax increase. And that doesn't matter if it's a Democrat that proposes it or a Republican that proposes it. It's a tax increase.
It's a tax increase, yeah.
Built into our financial plans for our companies is the final phase out of that tax. Now, the governor has also proposed to move forward with raising the cap on net operating loss carry forward. Only 2 states in the entire nation cap the net operating loss deduction, Pennsylvania and Vermont, so it would be important for us to move forward there, and a big step. And he's proposed over time in the future reducing the corporate net income tax rate, which, as I said, is the highest flat rate, second highest marginal rate, however you want to look at it, in the nation, second only to Iowa. That would be a huge psychological boon to Pennsylvania and to economic development to be able to say, we are no longer that guy. We'd like to get to the middle of the pack.
Right.
One of the things that you have done and your organization has done, which has been responsibly courageous, is entered the minefield of primary and secondary education. Of course, the business community needs to have well-educated, well-prepared employees in the future. You need an employee pool that you can pull from. And one of the things that your organization has done is you've supported the whole notion of something that we've called Pennsylvania Common Core and the Keystone exams. Now, just in the last few months, the last 2 months or so, this has become controversial. Didn't seem to be controversial before. It seems to have become controversial now. What do you make of this, with these recent developments? How would you
it started out as pretty much,
interpret them?
if President Obama's for it, we're against it with some folks, and then became an ideological battlefield as well. And there were some ancillary issues that were raised. There are not part of the proposal. The original proposal came from the business community and largely Republican governors, but governors, bipartisan governors, got together. Now 45 states have said they want to go forward and do this. But the original impetus for this was, look, we're not going to make adequate yearly progress as defined by No Child Left Behind. We have to do something, and not all of our states educate to the same level. So the military, in fact, is with the business community very much in saying education is very uneven across the state. A young person that comes out of one state may be qualified to enter college or enter a career or enter the military, and not from the other state, yet they both have a high school diploma. And our students who, when their families get transferred, whether it be again in corporate America or in the military, and then they get assigned to another base, these students may not be ready for the education in that state, or they may be wasting a year as that state catches up to them. So that having voluntary standards makes a lot of sense to us, makes a lot of sense to the military, makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. That each state would still have the ability to create its own curricula and define what it needs, and then make an assessment, in our case, the Keystone exams. But it has become controversial, become caught up in a lot of internet rumor, urban myth, and legend. Frankly, I will blame Glenn Beck for a lot of that. It helps him sell books and TV shows, but it was abysmal reporting, and it was grossly inaccurate. But it's out there, and now we're answering to that. What's happened in Pennsylvania is, because of everything else that we just talked about at the top of our segment going on in Harrisburg, a lot of the policymakers asked the corporate administration and the Department of Education, can we pull back on this debate? We don't need one more thing like that on the plate right now. And we understand it's mostly a regulatory discussion, but let's give it some more thought. Let's talk about some of these issues that were raised, find out if they're true, not true. If they are true, what can we do to mitigate those, make those things go away? And I think there's been a constructive and very valuable dialogue with Senator Fulmer, the chairman of the Education Committee in the Senate, Representative Clymer, who chairs the Education Committee in the House, and Democrats as well with them. Andy Dinniman, the senator from Chester County, who co-chairs the committee in the Senate, and Representative Jim Roebuck from Philadelphia, who have said, let's have a constructive dialogue about this with the administration, see if we need to tweak this one more time. Hey, can we do that in July? And there was no real magic to getting it done in June. So that's been the decision. Let's put it off, take it to the Independent Regulatory Review Commission in the July timeframe.
Are you optimistic that you'll be able to counter the
it's one of those things that once you go through, here's what you heard, and here's the truth, lawmakers across the political spectrum, across the geography of Pennsylvania go, oh, okay, I get it.
Okay. So, but there's probably a learning curve for also Pennsylvanians in general too. So, is there going to be an effort?
The school districts. Well, the school districts have been working on implementation for more than 3 years.
Okay.
But you're right. It's uneven into the degree to which they've informed parents.
Right.
You know how it is. Nobody shows up at a school board meeting until there's going to be a tax increase or something.
Right.
So for the dozens of school board meetings of which implementation was talked about and there was no controversy.
Well, controversy might help then.
Controversy does help to
bring the numbers
to underscore the education.
And I have to be controversial and end this discussion. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Dave, please come back as we follow.
Always a pleasure.
We'll continue to follow Common Core. We will hope that you will continue to follow us. We hope to see you again next week. Dial in, and Maura and I will be here with other interesting topics and guests. We'll see you then.